This chapter, Chapter 6, is longer than I wanted, so I split it into 2 sections. If you haven't enjoyed the first section, please do so.
It's only 3 o'clock. And he kissed her, but I'm glad you're here. She smiled at him. Sheriff Murdoch called Dr. Phillips, and he said I should come home and take care of you. Amber told me everything about the bank hostage situation and what you did. I was afraid you would be exhausted. Are you okay? Another kiss and hug. I'm fine. A little tired, but I'm fine. When the sheriff told me to go home and rest, well, it seemed like a good idea. Susan looked at him. What are you making? He replied, I told you, beef stew, biscuits, and apple pie. For dinner, okay? Susan lifted her head. Smells wonderful. 5 o'clock, Roger was home, Susan and Alan, and Mrs. Murdoch were all around the table. Alan had set the table with bowls, tablespoon, knives, butter, and all the rest of the usual items. He served the stew and passed the biscuits. Everyone grasped hands, and Alan asked Roger to ask the Lord to bless dinner. Roger did just that, remembering Teresa, Amanda, and Sheriff John. At the end of the meal, Roger was very appreciative of the beef stew, biscuits, and especially the apple pie. Mrs. Murdoch thanked Alan for such a wonderful meal, and then she excused herself and went into the living room. Susan and Roger helped Alan to clean up the table and the kitchen. While they were working, Susan remarked, smiling, Alan, the dinner was wonderful. I usually put a little thyme in the stew to enhance the flavor, and not quite so much cinnamon in the pie. Alan wondered whether he would ever make beef stew and apple pie again. I guess I'm really incompetent after all. He still loved Susan but wondered if he could ever make her truly happy. Amber and Alan were on a stakeout sitting in an unmarked car in civilian clothing. Amber said, Partner, you seem a little unhappy. What's the problem? He replied, Oh, a while back. Remember when we had that little old fellow who tried to rob the bank? I made beef stew, biscuits, and apple pie. Amber interrupted, that sounds wonderful. Man, I'm hungry. Sorry I interrupted, go on. He said, Susan said, it was wonderful but I can't help but wonder if I would ever be able to make her happy. She replied, Just what did she say? He answered, she said, the dinner was wonderful. But she usually put a little thyme in the stew to enhance the flavor, and not quite so much cinnamon in the pie. Amber replied, when this kind of issue comes up, you have to stop listening at the word, wonderful. It is not meant as criticism. Her mouth just didn't know when to stop. Amber went on, Susan loves you desperately. You just have to listen to her but believe the wonderful part of what she says and don't take what you might think as criticism to heart. She doesn't mean it that way. The way I felt she might just as well have spit on me, answered Alan. She replied, I almost said, you shouldn't feel that way. I know that is the way you feel, and I understand the significance of what you said, what you feel. Alan, you have to believe that she isn't spitting on you. Amber, how is it that you know all this stuff? Alan asked. She answered, Alan, we're friends and partners. I don't really want to tell you how I know all this stuff. He sighed. Okay, hey, there's our guy. Watch him. Try to keep an eye on him, but we can't afford to be made. They made their subject, followed at a discreet distance, and found the location of his destination. This was reported to Sheriff Murdoch, and the case was handed over to the FBI. Alan tried very hard to follow Amber's advice. He tried to hear everything through the filter of love. I will do the very best for Susan and Roger, regardless of the cost to myself. Even though he felt horrible, he acted like he was the happiest man on earth. Alan got a call from Dr. David saying that Susan had gone through a very hard day, having dealt with the death of an infant victim of severe abuse. Quite frankly, Alan was paralyzed. He didn't know what to do. On a whim, he called Amber and asked her what he should do. Amber said, I can't help you, Alan. the best advice I can give you is to follow your heart. Good luck." He called Dr. David and asked him where Susan was. Dr. David told him she was at the hospital. Alan drove to the hospital, and he arrived just as she was coming out. He pulled up, opened the window and asked, "Want a ride home, beautiful?" She smiled at him through her cloud of fatigue, despair, and gloom. She got into the car and broke down in tears. He pulled into a parking space, killed the engine and took her in his arms and just held her until she stopped crying. "Oh, Alan, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you." He started the car, backed out and started home. "Susan, do you want to talk about it?" She said, "No, not right now. But I'm so glad you love Roger and me." He drove her home, then he went to his own apartment and went to bed. "I wish someone loved me." Amber called Susan. "Alan told me that you had a horrendous day. He called me and asked what he should do. I told him to follow his heart." "What did he do?" She told Amber. "He came and picked me up at the hospital. When I got into his car, I had a meltdown. He just parked the car and held me until I got hold of myself. He took me home and left." Amber asked, "He didn't stay with you? He didn't take care of dinner?" Susan answered, "No, I guess he was just tired." Susan asked, "Amber, you and Alan seem to be very close, but I know you're dedicated to your man. Can you tell me the dynamics of your relationship with Alan?" She answered, "Alan is my partner. If one of us is involved in a hairy situation, Sheriff Murdoch will send the other to be back up. We have saved each other's lives many times. With that kind of history you come to respect the other deeply, even love each other like a brother and sister." Susan went on, "When we are together, he acts happy, but I can tell there is something that's not right. I don't know how to talk to him about it. I can't help but wonder whether he still wants to marry me." Amber told her, "Oh, everyone has doubts, but Alan loves you desperately. You know we have times when we are just sitting waiting for something to happen, and we talk a lot. Ever since he met you, about all he can talk about are you and Roger. I firmly believe that you two will marry. It's just that you both will have to work hard at understanding, loving, and communicating with each other, in love. You know yourself that both of you have been rejected. In a word, you're both damaged merchandise. Both of you are going to have to work very hard in your marriage." Susan went on, "But Amber, what about now?" Amber replied, "Your best bet is to fix dinner. Call him and tell him he has 10 minutes to get there for dinner. Then when he gets there, when Roger and Mary are in bed, seduce him. Start with the greatest amount of décolletage you can muster decently. You have to convince him how much you need him." Susan replied, "But what about all those scars? I mean, they're hideous." Amber responded, "Alan will not even notice or care. It's you, and he loves you so much that it just won't make a difference." Susan answered, "Okay, I'll do it." Susan began to prepare dinner, steak, baked potatoes, mixed vegetables, and ice cream. Then she called Alan just as Amber had suggested. She told Mrs. Mary what she was going to do. "I'm going to seduce Alan. I hope that doesn't offend you." Mrs. Mary replied, "No dear, I have done that for my husband, God rest his soul, when I thought he needed it." She went through all her bras and blouses and chose the ones which displayed her assets to the best advantage. When Alan arrived, she met him at the door with a hug and a kiss. His eyes virtually popped out of their sockets. She smiled, "Like what you see?" Alan stammered, "Yeah, yes, very much." She invited him in. "Dinner is waiting. Come in." Dinner was appreciated by everyone. Mrs. Mary asked, 8 o'clock is Roger's bedtime, right?" Susan said, "Yes." Mrs. Mary said, "I think I would like to sit in the living room and read until then if that's okay with you." Susan replied, "Mary, this is your home. You do whatever you like." Mary replied, "Yes, I know, but you have plans for this young deputy, don't you?" Susan blushed, "Yes, but we can wait." 8 o'clock and Susan sent Roger off to get ready for bed. Mary put her book down, made a big issue of yawning, and went off to her room. A few minutes and Roger came in to kiss his mama goodnight, and he gave a hug to Deputy Alan, and he went off to bed. Susan had a big smile on her face and asked Alan to dance. While they danced, she began to blush, and yet she was determined to seduce him. They collected everything and went to her bedroom. She breathed in Alan's ear, "Stay with me tonight, please, darling. Stay with me." The next morning Susan got up, showered, and dressed for the day. Alan told Susan that he would have to go to his apartment to shower, shave, and dress for the day. She asked, "Will you come back?" He replied, smiling a very broad grin, "You better believe I will." He took her in his arms, held her gently and kissed her. "Susan, let's get married tomorrow. I'll call Pastor Dan and see if he would marry us like he did Sheriff Murdoch and Amanda." She hugged him very tightly, saying, "Okay. Let's get married tomorrow." Well, Pastor Dan agreed, if the three of them would pray during the day and follow the Lord's leading. Alan, Susan, and Roger decided to pray for the Lord's leading, and they promised to let Pastor Dan know in what direction the Lord would lead them. The next day they told Pastor Dan that they didn't experience a bolt of lightning, a great wind, or a violent storm, but that they still felt that marriage was the right thing to do. Roger was beside himself with joy. He was going to have a new daddy, just like Teresa. They invited their friends to a special dinner after church. Their guests were Amber Clark and her husband, Sheriff Murdoch, Amanda and Teresa, Jerry Roberts, and Connie, Dr. David, and Georgina. Alan had fired up the barbecue and laid on steaks for everyone. Susan wrapped the potatoes in foil and put them on the grill. Then she mixed up a garden salad. After dinner, everyone was relaxing in the living room. Susan was very busy being hostess, so Alan and Amber were talking. Amber asked, "Alan, do you remember asking me how I knew all that stuff?" Alan looked at her. "Yeah. I remember, and you said that you didn't want to tell me." She told him, "When you reacted to Susan being a doctor, I knew that you might reject me. Because I am also a doctor, a board-certified psychiatrist, and marriage counselor." Alan started, "Why are you here as a deputy sheriff?" She sighed, "As a psychiatrist, I saw the same people every week. They weren't about to make the changes that they needed to make. Although I made a lot of money, I was empty. I tried marriage counseling with even worse results. So, I went to police academy. I graduated top of my class, but no one would hire me. Sheriff Murdoch was the only one who would give me a chance. And you, Alan, have been the best partner a gal could possibly have. At least as a cop, I can make a difference." Alan smiled. "You have made a difference. A difference in law enforcement and in helping Susan and me." Everyone finally left. As 8 o'clock approached, Roger walked up to Alan. "Deputy Alan, can I call you Dad now?" Alan took him in his arms and hugged him and kissed him. "Yes, son, I am now your dad. I think you're such a special boy. I love you. And now I'll take a kiss from you and say, good night, my son." Roger smiled a huge smile and kissed Alan. "Good night, Dad." Off he skipped to bed. Susan looked at Alan. "Husband, let's go to bed." The grin on Alan's face was a sight to behold. "Okay, wife. Let's go to bed." The county commissioners and Sheriff Murdoch made plans to hold an awards ceremony to recognize officers that had distinguished themselves by extraordinary acts of courage, valor, or imagination in the line of duty. It was announced that 3 deputies would be given awards for valor: Amber Clark, George Pond, and Alan Smith. Several other county employees and civilians would also be honored for various exploits in the line of duty. One would be Jerry Roberts for his assistance in helping the hostages escape during the failed bank robbery. The first to be recognized were the county employees, then Jerry Roberts. The first of the deputies to be recognized was Amber Clark for meritorious valor, putting her life on the line for several citizens. The second to be recognized was Deputy George Pond for rescuing 3 children from drowning in a nearby lake. The last was Corporal Alan Smith for 2 events: the saving of Susan Allen and her son from her deranged husband and for the bank robbery incident. Just at the end of the ceremony, Sheriff Murdoch told Deputy Smith to stand fast. Then John introduced Marine General Michael Johnson. General Johnson took the podium and began to speak. On July 6, 1967, Gunnery Sergeant Alan Smith rescued 27 Marines, taking them out of the line of fire to a secluded aid station, taking himself 13 enemy rounds. Suffering pain and loss of blood, he put the lives of those 27 Marines above his own. Gunnery Sergeant Smith has upheld the highest traditions of the United States Marine Corps. On behalf of the President of the United States, I am honored to award to Deputy Alan Smith this well-deserved, howbeit much delayed, Congressional Medal of Honor, for conspicuous valor in the face of overwhelming enemy fire. The general then approached Alan and hung the ribbon and medal around Alan's neck. He stepped back and saluted him. "Thank you for your service, Marine, and for your continued service as a distinguished deputy sheriff, to protect and serve." As Alan returned the general's salute, Sheriff Murdoch stepped back to the podium. "There is one more item of business to be conducted today. Deputy Amber Clark is from this moment, Corporal Amber Clark. Deputy George Pond is from this moment, Corporal George Pond. And Corporal Alan Smith is from this moment, Sergeant Alan Smith. To all those recognized today, on behalf of the County Board of Commissioners, thank you so very much. This ceremony is now at an end." But before anyone could move, the President of the Board of Commissioners asked for everyone's attention. He began, "Sheriff Murdoch, the board has asked me to recognize your many acts of valor and years of service with this Medal of Valor and this 4th star for your collar. Thank you, Sheriff John Murdoch." Then off to the side, the president of the board said, "John, I know that you deserve much more. But the 4th star comes with a raise in pay. Thanks." Susan was so proud she could barely restrain herself. She walked up to Alan, wrapped her arms around his neck, and planted a very enthusiastic kiss on his lips. "Oh, Alan, I'm so proud of you I could burst. I'm so glad you're mine. You great big hunk of Marine, I can hardly wait to get you home." Roger had come up and hugged his new dad. "Dad, I love you, and I'm happy that you're my dad." Then Roger kissed Alan, very unwilling to let him go. Roger finally allowed other people to shake his dad's hand and congratulate him. Amber and George had their families there, and they were as proud of their heroes as Susan and Roger were of their hero. Finally, Sheriff Murdoch told his 3 heroes to take the rest of the day off. "But report for duty tomorrow, we still have a county to protect and serve." Alan and Amber approached the sheriff. "Sheriff, will we still be partners?" Sheriff Murdoch replied, "You two are the best team I've got. I would be a fool to break you two up. Other teams are coming along, but you're the best." Amber and Alan smiled. "See you tomorrow, partner." A hug and off they went with their families. As the family was getting ready to leave, General Johnson approached Alan and told him why his award was delayed so long. "Quite frankly, Gunny, your award was approved many years ago. It just got lost at the bottom of someone's in-basket. If Representative Carr had not sent an inquiry, it just might have stayed in the in-basket for many more years. I guess someone cared enough about it, and so alerted your representative." Alan looked at Susan. "Did you do this?" She smiled. "I did." "How did you figure that out?" He replied, "It had to be someone who knew of my service in Vietnam and the bullets I took. And it had to be someone who cared enough to try to find out what happened. It had to be you, wife, love of my life.